Thank you. I know that the slot after lunch is the toughest spot to present, but I'll give it a shot. So, hello everybody. My name is Shardul. I work in the analytics team within Kantar. So I work same team as Satya Menon. And for those who don't know, Kantar is a large marketing data insights and analytics organization. And our focus really is getting a meaningful understanding of how people think and do, so that we can help guide the brand's futures for our clients. Right. And this is my first time at MASB. So I wasn't exactly sure what to expect, but then after Joanna gave her talk, I was quite inspired because there are two things that really overlap between what she talked about from a MASB perspective and from me. So firstly, just like MASB, I have my feet in two worlds. So my day job is as an analytics person within Kantar, but my night and weekend job, I'm also a PhD student, and I'm focused on business and business analytics. So my goal is also how do you bring the two worlds together? And second is when Joanna talked about the mission of MASB, which is to elevate the role of CEO into boardrooms, I realized that it's quite similar to the topic I have for today, which is some of my ideas around how analytics shapes marketing success in today's connected world. So what I'm going to do is talk about the connected world, and I'll briefly talk about what it is, and therefore the importance of analytics and marketing in decision-making for success of firms and companies in that particular way. Right. And as Frank said, if you have any questions as I'm going through, please feel free to stop me and ask those questions so we can make it interactive. There are sort of three things that I will talk about as we go through. The first one is that the connected world of today has created new opportunities for marketers. So what do I mean by connected world? I mean the digital world, right? So today, everything happens online, and that means consumers, the way they interact with brands are different, competitors, the new competitors that come up are different, and the things that marketing can do with the availability of data is quite immense. So that's the big difference between the world of today versus the world of yesterday. Companies which fail to take advantage of these opportunities will lose market share to more adaptive competitors. So we are seeing time and again, companies which are born in today's world have a different way of operation. And the companies which have existed for a long time are really struggling to keep up and fight off those competition. So unless these companies change and adapt, they are quite vulnerable. And my third point is really analytics has a crucial role in helping these organizations identify and leverage these opportunities, because then you can grow revenue, market share, and profit. So that's sort of the summary of my presentation, and I'll go through some of these areas of where these changes are. Now, connected world is not really a new thing, right? Most companies know about it. And therefore, we see a lot of focus and talk around digital transformation. So almost every company is undergoing some form of digital transformation or the other. The challenge, though, is the narrowness with which many companies define digital transformation. So some of the companies zoom in on the word digital, and everything that they do around that is about how do I use more digital media in my communication? How do I move my money from non-digital or traditional channels into digital channels? So their focus becomes very narrow around communication. There are other group of companies which think about digital transformation as personalization at scale. So a lot of their focus is in terms of how do I start collecting my first party data? How do I strike partnerships to get second party data? And what third party data sets exist that I can pull in? That's sort of their stream one of activity. Stream two then becomes what are the marketing platforms on which these can reside? How do I analyze those? And then how do I connect them to the media platform so that I can activate against. So these are sort of the two typical areas in which digital transformation happens. And my sort of my focus is we need to think of digital transformation as transformation for the digital age. And that change in mindset or definition starts changing how we view things and the opportunities that we look at. So what is the transformation for what is the digital age? In digital age, from my perspective, there are three things that are very different. One is consumers. The way consumers strike relationships with brands is very different. And I'll go a little bit in depth on that. Second is competition. There are new sets of competitors coming in with very new value models that is just disrupting the competitive landscape. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And thirdly is data. With the access to large amounts of data, it's possible to learn a lot more. It's possible to have adaptive campaigns, and it's possible to experiment a lot more, which again has big implications about how we think about marketing and what we can do. So those really are the three pillars. And what I'm going to do is go through each of them and sort of talk through some of the work that analytics is doing or can do in each of these areas to take benefit from these changes. Okay. Feel free to sort of stop me, ask questions or comment. So firstly, let's start with consumers. So consumers now have a very different relationship with business. So communication in the pre-digital era was always one way. So you had firms or brands sending messages to consumers. Today, consumers expect to have a two-way communication with brands. And what that means is that brands no longer have to, brands not only have to give their messages to consumers, but they have to listen to how consumers are talking about it and then find ways to respond to it. So that's really the first big change. The second big change is the information networks. So in the pre-digital era, the firm or the brand was the main influencer. But today, there are a myriad of influences that everybody has when they take decisions. So even when I think about myself, it is, I talk to my friends, I go online, I'm listening to messages, I'm looking at sponsorships. There's so many things that influence me that it's no longer one group that is the chief influencer. The implication for marketing from that is we need to understand what these influencers are. Who are these influencers? Because unless we understand them, we can't play a role in helping them sort of promote our brand for them. So these are really two big areas in which consumers are different.
Can you unpack your definition of influencer? Because I'm seeing it very severely.
Okay.
Depending on who we speak to, like I'm going and seeing like content creators being influencers.
Yeah.
I'm going and seeing like social media personalities that people just comment heavily. Yeah. What's the definition of influencer that you're using?
Yeah, so anybody who plays a role in influencing me to think differently.
Okay, so you're talking about the general verb sense rather than as a title. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so the task that we have is how do we find opportunities in these customer relationships? So there are sort of three ways in which to do that. First one is we have to get better at mining unstructured data. And Joanna, you talked a little bit about unstructured data. But that's how consumers are talking about things. They are going on blogs, they are going on X or Twitter, they are going on Facebook, Instagram, and they are talking about things. And at this point, most of the analytics teams are very good at structured data, which is a lot of numbers, tables, but are still building skills in how do you analyze unstructured data, social, even like things like video calls, phone calls. How do you analyze that and get information out of it? One example I'm going to show you about some work is around social data. So this is about trying to find out what are the topics that people are talking about in a particular area, and then what is important, what's not important. So this is just a grid to help us analyze. But the idea here is, A, how do we collect that data? It sits in different places, finding the right ways to collect that data, clean it, interpret it, and put it in a structure that allows us to determine next. So the way to look at this is on the x-axis, you have the sentiment of the discussion, right? So this is where we have pulled data from social media about certain topics. So this you can see is around sort of technology area, but then we have grouped them. And you can see that we have then said, is the sentiment of that topic positive or negative? And the volume of that discussion, is that high or low? And then you start looking at these quadrants, which are saying, if the sentiment is very positive and it's a niche topic, there are opportunities to amplify those topics and leverage them for our brand. If, however, it's a strongly negative and a niche topic, we do need to be prepared because we need to keep monitoring it. In case these topics start getting bigger and bigger and we are negative on it, we have a problem, right? So it's just an example of all this information that exists today, but it's all very unstructured. So the more we get better at understanding this unstructured data, the more we are plugged into consumer conversations. And therefore, we are able to say, okay, do we want to respond to it, not respond to it? Do we prepare for it or not prepare?
Just a question on clarification. When I read lead the debate or expand and expand.
Yeah.
Who do you refer to? Is it the company, the researcher, or who?
No, these are just titles about the boxes. So it's just like a recommendation, which is for the brand. So for example, in this case, you can see that it's a negative sentiment, but it's quite a large topic. So people are talking about it. And they're talking about capturing data on private browsing. So saying that when people are browsing, there's a negativity against data being captured. So then the question is, how do you overcome that negativity? Yeah.
So building on Mark's question, of how do you qualify whether a brand has permission to participate in each of these quadrants?
Well, you can look
Or
at,
whether they have to participate, like CrowdStrike as an example,
right.
There wasn't a data breach,
Hmm.
but they're a cybersecurity company that has just got like tarnished,
Yeah,
potentially beyond repair.
yeah.
So like in that situation, using this type of framing,
Yeah.
would you go to a CrowdStrike competitor and share this type of architecture? as to
No,
what they
so
should say?
I-
Like, I'm trying to understand how
Yeah.
you use this.
Yeah, so let's say, let's take I'm CrowdStrike,
Yeah,
right? I want to understand what people are talking about me in the context of the data breach.
yeah,
And which topics are specifically negative and are talked about a lot. So that's sort of one piece, which is what I'm saying. And this is what's happening
Yeah.
in the context of my brand versus competitor brand. Then the next question is, what should I do about it? Right? So, and that's a strategy question, right? It's saying, do I have the right to participate? Should I participate? Should I let it die? Like, should I observe it for another week and see, does it die out or not die out?
so this is called an insight, and you now switch modalities to figure out whether you should take.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, but the point I want to make is there's a lot of unstructured data out there, which is conversations that people are having. We need to participate in that, right?
Thanks.
Yeah. The second is, as the number of influencers start increasing, we need to be able to be better at identifying those influencers so that without knowing who they are, it's quite difficult to participate with them. Right? One example that I want to give you is a company that we were working with. They wanted to understand the reputation and regulatory conversations that individuals are having with respect to their brand and the industry. So that, and try to understand, can I forecast which influencers will start talking about what? So what we did here is we started off with looking at what are the conversations happening today around those specific topics and who are the people having those conversations. So there's a mix of what we see online, but then there are certain experts who would come in with, I know these are the people that are the most loud about it. So you want to start with the seed list, but extend that to who else are the people with very high volume of followers and influencers. And then we categorize them into very upstream. So these are people from whom the information source starts to downstream, all the way up to consumers. And then trying to see, can I start forecasting that when a news starts seeding in this area, how long does it take to come up till here? And therefore, can I start monitoring what these people are saying? This is all public information, what these people are saying publicly, so that I can be prepared for the other sets of influencers to start picking that up. So, yeah,
Sorry, I'm gonna harass you all afternoon, I think.
that's okay.
How do you get to the representativeness of this as well, right? Because I would presume this varies significantly, like a health researcher versus a technology researcher would have kind of a different cascading path. So how do you sub-segment? Because it's not necessarily relevant, it's not all consumers, the general population, it's the
No.
consumers for whom that domain is relevant.
Yeah, so in some industries, it is a lot easier
Okay.
because you have defined authorities. In some other industries, you may not have these same groups. So like in a CPG, you might just have sort of celebrities
Right.
going direct to consumers. So yeah, so you have to make it up based on the industry. But the point again here is there are quite a lot of vocal influencers who do have an influence and a voice. We do need to start thinking about how do we identify them and how do we monitor what they are talking about. And sometimes there are influencer agencies who pull them in to participate in the brand communication.
Is this more B2C research? Because B2B cycle could be 2.5 years before someone makes
It's
a
a great
purchase.
point, it's a great
Right.
point.
Yeah,
There is
but
still influence.
Yeah, of
there
course.
is
Yeah, but
influence,
it's
yeah.
time lag,
It's the
right?
time lag
Yeah.
is much different.
Yeah, but we are not talking only about purchase here. We are also talking about mindset changes. Okay. So it could be like pharma companies who want to understand what are regulators talking about, how does that influence like my product growth in the next 3 to 5 years. So it could be very highly strategic, but also tactical in some. Like in CPG, it will be very tactical. Yeah. And then the
Can I
third,
just, sorry, can
yeah.
I just also ask, are you also measuring the influences from one group onto another
we
as
can
well?
do,
So the stakeholders, what are they saying that is actually influencing the policy maker, which actually makes the stakeholder more important?
we can look at temporal data and try to see if things spike in one group, how much time does it take for it to spike in
Yeah.
other groups, those kind of things.
Yeah. So message shift over time.
That's correct, yeah. And you can sometimes, when you do this across countries, you find that certain countries pick it up with a X time lag of other countries. So it becomes really interesting to see how this information flows across the digital world. And then the third part of that, I talked a little bit about how consumers are getting influenced by different things and different touch points. There is sort of this industry push in how do we build unified models that are able to, look at short-term sales with long-term equity, look at, typical paid media with unpaid media, with customer experience, CRM activities. So it's an ongoing sort of debate, and there are multiple approaches being talked about, but that's the third big initiative in the area of the transformation for the digital age and what it's doing with customers. The next one I want to move is competition. So in today's age, competition is coming from different places and it's coming with very different value models. So what do I mean by that? In the pre-digital age, you were competing within a fixed category. Today, that competition is coming from multiple places. So for example, if you take automotives, if I'm a General Motors, in the past, I would compete with a Ford, a Toyota, a Honda, any other automotive. Today, a General Motors is competing with not just with these companies, they are competing with Uber, Lyft. They are competing with rental cars. They are also talking about competing with the flying taxis that are coming. And they have really serious questions about the amount of technology that's in their cars, and therefore who owns that technology. So this competition is really fluid and dynamic, and no longer is it okay for us to predefine a category and try to just compete within that category. Because we need to start looking at consumer needs, and therefore what are the range of competitors that can satisfy that need. And the second area that's disrupting competition is this thing about intermediation and disintermediation. So today, there are a lot of disintermediaries coming. So you have an Amazon, which is playing a big role in how a product goes to the consumers and in what format does it go to the consumer. Who gets preference over the other? You have Facebook, who decides on what kind of advertising can reach a particular group of consumers. But then there are also companies who are trying to go direct to consumers. So Nike is a famous example where they wanted to go direct to consumers, cutting out all the intermediaries. Another example is this, the dilemma that hotels face when companies like Booking.com, TripAdvisor, and others came in, where they were offering a lot more discount that these hotels were not offering. So therefore, the value models to consumers is totally different in today's world. So the challenge really that we as marketers and analysts have to face is we need to almost constantly recalibrate our value offering to consumers. And that means sort of three implications. One is be very clear about what are the changing needs and priorities of our customers. So typically, we look at segmentation, but we might need to do that more frequently, looking at both need-based segmentation, but also putting in behavioral data. So I think in one of the previous presentations, you talked about segmenting. I think you talked about segmenting based on behavior and attitudes. And what is getting more and more important is how do you activate against those segments? So connecting that to larger population or media platforms that allows us to target these consumers with different messages, learn from how they are responding, and recalibrate. That's sort of one way of looking at value offerings. Second is track the changing competitive landscape. So we know who are our key competitors and we know who the big competitors are, but how do we identify who are the new competitors coming up? How do we identify what other things are people buying for the same needs? And one of the avenues that we have started using a lot is search data. So search is quite rich in terms of connecting needs to companies, which company, and to therefore the types of products we offer.
Question for you, with the rise of AI models and engines, are they making that data accessible? Like Google, of course, sells their search data, but does OpenAI or others sell their prompt data? Like they don't sell that?
No.
No? Okay. All right. That's getting interesting because OpenAI just launched their Google competitor.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's going to be so difficult, right?
Yeah.
Perplexity.ai is another big competitor of Google, right?
Yeah.
And Google will have also has its own Gemini. Yeah. But this is an example where we focused on prepared food market. And this is from sort of search data. But what you see is, you can look at what's the scale of demand versus the change in year-on-year change in demand across different subcategories of food. And those sort of help us understand, okay, are there certain subcategories which are emerging that we need to start thinking about as potential competitors if we don't play in that space? So again, there is richness to search data. There are alcohol companies looking at, what new flavors should be launched based on what are people searching for in terms of flavor. So I would say like, not just understanding need-based segments, but also trying to track competitive landscape and what is changing. In the US specifically, we have, regional level competitors who just come up and nobody knows who they are till sort of they become big. So we want to stop that if we can.
Sorry, can I just ask,
Yeah.
that data, is that share of search data combined with sales?
No, this is just search data. This is just volume
This
of
is
search.
just search.
Yeah. It's a relative volume of search.
And this is, like, it says Google search, is this global search or is this geofenced or,
Yeah, this, this is for a specific country.
okay.
Yeah, but the key point really is, so we have found search as a really good tool to understand emerging.
Yeah, so I'm just checking, so you're using search as a proxy for demand?
Clearly, yes, as a proxy of
Okay.
interest or demand. Yeah.
So it shows, right, okay.
And then the third is then within those segments, identify value models. So again, discrete choice modeling is quite prevalent in the industry, but trying to look at it by our need segment, to try to understand what features are more appealing and therefore what should we talk about. But then I also like the concept of minimum viable products, which are basically coming out with these new products, but not full scale and testing them. So I'm assuming everybody's familiar with testing minimum viable products, but one good example is there's this company which wanted to understand, everybody buys fresh sushi in supermarkets, but if I have a 1-day-old sushi at a discount, will people buy? So a typical sort of scenario would be to do research and ask people these questions. But with minimum viable product, you want to have minimal investment to really test whether people can put skin in the game. So they took fresh sushi, they labeled it 1 day old and put it next to the fresh sushi at a discount. And they just recorded how many people actually ended up buying it. So those are newer ways in which you can start really validating and testing whether your new concepts are actually people are going to pay for it or not. And then you can keep increasing the skin in the game as your product gets more full-fledged. People are doing it with software now, but in the marketing world, we don't do that enough. But that's what the new technology companies which are coming in are doing it quite commonly. So those are sort of 3 areas around competition. And then, of course, the third area is data. So data is everywhere. And sort of 2 points on this. In the pre-digital world, our challenge was to find data. What can we find data to do some analysis? Today, data is coming in like a flood, and our challenge is how do we manage all that data? And the volume of data is increasing. The velocity of which at which it is coming is tremendous, and the variety of data. So you have data coming from all sorts. It's really challenging on managing, but management of data becomes quite critical because there is richness to that data and insights that can be drawn from that data. The second aspect is accountability. Right? We all know that everybody wants to make data-enabled decisions, and there's a lot of pressure to make those decisions. So how do we provide, as an analytics specialist, how do we provide the right systems that allow decision makers who maybe not be as well versed with data and analytics to take those decisions confidently? So those really are the 2 challenges in today's world with data. And sort of the key asks for us is how do we turn data into an asset rather than get us to freeze because of data damage. So again, three things. We need to identify meaningful data. This is just a chart I put on, some of the things, data sets that are available, and there are thousands and thousands of data sets. A typical way is to say, what all data do I have? How do I bring it together, harmonize it, put it in one place? Usually that's extremely time consuming and inefficient, right? And costs a lot of money. Therefore, the importance of a data audit, or the way I call it decision audit, which is basically start with what are the decisions you want to take, what information do you need to take those decisions, and what data will allow you to give that information. And then saying, how do I capture that data? How do I convert that into information? And how do I put it in a way to the decision makers that makes it easy for them to take those decisions? So that becomes critical, identifying meaningful data. Second is making insights available to decision makers. So typically there are two ways in which insights get sent to decision makers. First is, through presentations and reports. Second is then you evolve into dashboards, which are maintained but are built in a way that they tell a story so that it's easier for decision makers to do it. The third, which is the large language models that are coming up, more and more companies are looking at data-based features to do it, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about. So this year we launched a product called Kaya, which is basically Kantar's AI assistant. And the idea was, instead of giving dashboards to people, could we create an interface, the top interface, where they just type in a question and they get a response. So what's happening to my brand? I get a response from what's happening to my brand. But what we've learned is that we need to have multiple layers. So you have the data layer sitting at the bottom, which is critical. The LLM model, if you just leave everything to the LLM model, you're in trouble, because LLMs are just going through all the data and will come back with some answers. So what we have done is we have added a third layer called skills layer. So essentially what we do is we say, if I'm an analytics specialist, how would I answer that question? So what mathematical routines or analysis would I go through to be able to answer that question? And those are the skills that we have built. So what the LLM does, it just translates a human typed question into, okay, well, what is this person asking? And then it pulls the right skill to analyze that data and then comes back with the answer. And what the LLM does is just translates that back into a human paragraph that people can understand. So again, this is just one way of doing it, but you will see more and more that people who are not involved and don't know the nitty-gritties of how this research was done, where is this data from, what are the things you need to be concerned about with this data and not look at. Increasingly, you will have chat-like capabilities that are not just general chat, but are programmed to look at the data with a certain view that is customized to how that organization views it, or what is best practice. So for example, some companies would say, these are the three metrics that are most important to my company. So when a question like, how is my brand performing is asked, I want this system to look at only those three metrics and give an answer, not look at all the metrics or not look at a default metric. So it's getting increasingly more sophisticated, but the objective is making insights available to decision makers. And the final point is making insights conducive to decision making. And this is where the role of analytics becomes even more prominent, which is instead of just giving lots of information that tell a story, could we build models that are allowing these decision makers to play out certain scenarios. So optimization models, scenario planning models. This is just a picture from one of our systems, but the idea here is people can put in their decisions and see and project what is likely to be the success of a key member. So again, that allows them to take those decisions in a much more informed manner, rather than everybody looking at the same piece of insights, but taking different decisions out of it.
And is that a one-directional model or is it bi-directional? Like, can it ask back clarified questions from the person putting in the prompt?
So right now, this is one direction. But if we merge this with the previous thing, it could be bi-directional, but but the idea is it will be more conversation.
Right, so it could find
Yeah.
its own prompting. 'Cause
There is
that's a big problem right now.
Yeah. You mean prompting?
The system prompting you to get clarifications.
No,
Yeah,
that
that's a
that
huge-
happens.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big problem today.
Yeah, so that actually applies here in the previous chart. So we are finding different LLM systems have different ways of operation. So like a Gemini will ask you more questions than an OpenAI. But then we
So
have,
is that LLM Kantar's proprietary LLM or is this like a part, okay,
yeah. I mean, we are not building our own LLM.
Yeah.
It's impossible. But we are leveraging them, but we are then setting guardrails to ensure that it's not doing its own thing. And it's
don't have
working with,
LSD trips on your AI system.
yeah. And it's also not like, if a question can't be answered, we want to say, okay, talk to the insights specialist to get it answered. Because a lot of times you work with one or two data sets. And then the answers are limited to those two data sets. But if the answer needs to be broader, you want to raise that so that you can then say, okay, I need to add this third data set so that you can get a better answer. If this is a question that is going to frequently come. So it's quite a recurring thing.
I have one question when I'm looking at the various perspectives that you take to data. To fully see all that, what is possible in terms of using language models and so on. But one question that I always have is, how do I validate that kind of data or new information insight that I'm getting out of it, with respect to some relevant outside or outcome criteria? Do you have anything that is?
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to validate. So the way we have framed this is there are three things that you want as insights. One is what's happening, right? Second is why is it happening? And third is what do I need to do about it? Right? So three broad questions that insights answers. At this point, most of our work is what's happening. So 60 to 70% of the questions that come in from marketing decision maker to the insights organization are what's happening here, what's happening there, is it increasing, decreasing? This eliminates that. And that is easy to validate because
I think I'm referring to a different level. Right?
Yeah,
Because
okay.
it's, even these questions need to be asked for a purpose. The purpose in business is probably to make money or to
Right.
sales or whatsoever. So when it comes to decision models, right, it starts with the question, what are you going to optimize?
Oh,
Is it
okay.
profit contribution,
Yeah.
or is it market share, or is
Yeah.
it sales growth, or what is it? And each of these information to turn it into an asset means that you expect from using that information for some sort of better decision making.
Got it.
It turns into something that is cached in at the data point. in
Yeah.
time.
So
And that's not, in my experience, it's not so easy to validate that because it starts with many questions. The
yeah.
data availability to match it, but that's why I'm interested in.
This, I think you're probably referring to this area where I talked about scenario planning and decision engine, where there are typically like a typical way is holdouts, right? So to hold out certain data of what has happened and then see if how good is the model at predicting that. So in terms of future, like it can predict future decisions, but many a times the there are other things that change which make it a bit difficult to validate.
Shardul, if I may. Mark, the way I interpreted your question is a little bit different. What that AI engine is doing is simply take the effort out of insights people, pulling up report after report and trying to collate the information about what's happening to my brand. Is it going up or down? And is it because some other brand is is taking share away? So all it's doing is pulling that data and simplifying the labor involved. It has not necessarily gotten to the stage of optimization, which is the other element that Shardul is talking about. So it's stepwise taking and helping the insights people with decision making. The engine that we have crafted is just at that base level of, can I simplify the task for you? So you don't have to look into 10 reports to answer this.
Yeah, I understand all these activities. It's just that we have so many approaches out there that where you just condense data to turn it into some new structured kind of information. You know, basically what you're doing is you're structuring the information for the user. But it always starts with the question, is that kind of structure that I put on it by using some technique, some model, method or whatsoever, is it relevant? But and that means you need to have some outside, some benchmark criteria. It could be very different, but you need to define it. And in most cases, I would define it, in most cases, to say, is it relevant to value generation? But it doesn't need to be always this case. But I find this question not so easy. It's because you have different approaches and you get different results. The question is, okay, which one is now the appropriate one?
Are you referring to trust as well? Trust in those models and what the insights they're generating?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Particularly when it's forecasting, if you do X or Y, here's what we anticipate to happen. And if there's a significant budget implication in that decision, how much trust and faith do you have?
See, you're talking about the audit trail. That's the problem with a lot of these models is that you don't know how deep it's going and referring to the information to make its either inference or summary that it goes and spits out for you. And it's also very hard to get the audit trail. I don't even know the full path, but like what were primary ingredients that you refer to construct this? Like you had a slide up there that shows that you're pulling from the different internal systems, right? And it's like, can you tag like what was an influential source? Like I'm going back to my university days where it's like I write an essay, I cite my sources. Yeah. Right. And it's like there's clearly, I cited this thing 7 times. That clearly had a greater impact on what I went and said. And I find that seems to be the big problem in the AI domain today in my insights is that people don't know how deep is the sophistication. And it's not a criticism of what you have here. It's a whole industry-wide problem. I think you guys are tackling it a different way, but I don't think it's sufficiently addressed. And I think this is what is going to go in and restrict access or adoption, not access, adoption by people that are putting big bets on their organization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm not talking about those big bets at all. Like I'm talking about simple problems. Like we have a company who monitors sales across 50 countries, right? And they get these sales from different country vendors and then pull it together. Currently, it sits in a big dashboard, right? And somebody has to start like, I want to compare this country against this country. They have to go and start pulling in filters and doing it.
But even that doesn't mean the point that I think a couple of people have just been making apply, which you did raise, so it all comes back to, the motivation behind the document criteria which you're using. And you mentioned revenue and margins, but unless you have more criteria, include, say, ethical questions. Is it fair or is it going to disadvantage someone? By the way, it will end up impacting your revenues, your profits, and your brand. Come up with wrong answers. And the weighting that you give to all these, is it understandable? All these kinds of things, transparent, all these things, if you don't set criteria, it all comes back to the person setting the criteria to stuff. Because if you don't set the right framework criteria, and how you determine the weighting behind the criteria that you set in the question, you're going to come up with very different answers, not quite dangerous answers.
Yeah.
Just for my own clarification, is the predictive modeling, that's human done, that's not AI based. It's the reporting slash, sort of insight delivery that's AI based. Is that correct?
Which one are you like?
So if you go back to your.
Oh,
notes,
okay, the previous slide.
Yeah, right there. okay?
Yeah.
So the analytics studio, the skill studio, that's an analyst working on that stage, right?
Not analyst, it's a skill that has been built into the system
Uh-huh.
based on how an analyst would answer that question.
Okay, so it is AI based
That's correct, yeah.
It's humans training the AI engine to answer.
on the
it.
methodology.
How would you answer, like, how will a human analyst answer and training the AI engine to answer in a similar way?
I just love the big can of worms that we opened up here.
Glad.
Oh, yeah, like
It is.
it's such a contentious topic because like I meant exactly what you put. It's the trust, right? Like how far, like what magnitude of a decision can I trust? Or what magnitude of a cost can I avoid
Mhm.
by using this? And I don't think we have figured that out. We're very early stage on that.
Totally.
So it's very
So-
cool.
The only thing, so three things to remember on the data part, right? One is identify meaningful data, critical. Think about how you want to convert that data into insights that get delivered to decision makers. And third is building some way for predictiveness so that people can test out different actions and see what are the likely implications of those actions so that it makes it easier for them to take better decisions. So with that, thank you very much. And if you want to continue this discussion, happy to do that. Thank you.